Hey guys, what's going on today? BOJoeKO here, and we are back with our Columbus Blue Jackets GM mode. And like I said last time, guys, you wanted to see, I asked you guys whether you wanted to see the whole playoffs wrapped up into one video or still the series separate per video. And a couple of you guys didn't really many votes, but the majority was to see the whole playoffs wrapped up in the one video. So that's what we're going to do, our Year 7 playoff run. So first off, in round number 1, we're going to be taking on the Boston Bruins. So their lineup: Milan Lucic, Patrice Bergeron, Riley Smith, Brad Marchand, David Krejci, Seth Griffith, Jordan Caron, Torrey Mitchell, and Louis Eriksson, and Joan Su, Ryan Garbutt, and Aaron Volpatti. So they got a pretty good, decent lineup. I mean, they got guys like Lucic and Bergeron in your first, and you got a pretty nice, solid second with Krejci and Marchand. Their right wingers are a little bit weak. Smith actually isn't too bad at 86, so he's a decent player there. And then their depth lineup was actually pretty good. That they had a sniper down there in the third line with Louis Eriksson. So their offense actually wasn't too bad. Defensively, Johnny Boychuk, Dougie Hamilton, Dennis Seidenberg, Dennis Weidman, Torrey Krug, and Joe Morrow. So their defense actually was pretty good. Dougie Hamilton, I think, is a top 2 by this time at a 90 overall. Our defense is still much better than theirs, especially because we have Doughty and OEL, but it was still a pretty evenly matched up series defensively and offensively. And, of course, in the net they have Tuukka Rask with Malcolm Subban. So let's get this simulation started. I times 2'd all these games up during the simulation so you guys can easily see. If you want to pause the video at any time to see like goals or points per game, you guys can go ahead, but here we go. Game number 1 against the Boston Bruins. It's a 2-2 tie, and stupid me, I turned injuries back on. I turned the automated rotate goalies off, but apparently the last game of the season had Semyon Varlamov starting the game, so Varlamov got the start in game number 1 because of my stupidness to switch Bobrovsky back in. So it's a 2-2 tie going into overtime, and with about 48 seconds left in the first overtime, Milan Lucic scored, and Boston would take a 3-2 win in game number 1 and a 1-0 series lead in the best of 7. So we start off game number 2 here. Adam Tambellini starts out the scoring with a 1-0 lead to get us out there. Bobrovsky is in the net. I guarantee you that for this one. Second period, Drew Doughty gets us a goal, and Seth Griffith gets them a goal. So it's 2-1 going into the third period now. But Sergei Bobrovsky is still in the net, and I have all the faith in him to close out this game, which he does. OEL gets the empty netter, and Columbus walks away with a 3-1 win in game number 2 to tie up the series at 1 apiece between the Boston Bruins. So very good game there. Our depth came through in our defense. So we move on to game number 3 now. After the first, it's 0-0. After the second, Daniel Sprong gets a goal there to make it a 1-0 lead, and they do tie it up with a goal there from Ryan Garbutt with about 13 minutes left. We go to overtime, and Patrick Kane gets the goal past Tuukka Rask in OT to get us a 2-1 lead and a 2-1 series lead as well. So our first line clicked pretty well in that game, and then we suffered our first injury. Tyler Toffoli does get hurt, and as a result, we are going to bring up Matthias, whatever, Janmark to play. Robbie Fabry, we move him up to the second line. Matthias Janmark, we move him in to play the second line. And I do believe we put him on the power play. No, we put Fabry on the power play. And now we move on to Game 4 against Boston. So after the first, it's a 1-1 tie with Lucic and Sprong scoring in the first. And then after the second, Brandon Dubinsky, third liner, gets us a goal there to get us a 2-1 lead going into the third period here. And once again, Sergei Bobrovsky closed down the door. Robbie Fabry gets a empty netter goal, and we win that game 3-1 to take a 3-1 series lead over the Boston Bruins, looking to close out this series in game number 5. So a pretty good game there from our team, and then we move on to game number 5 here. 1-1 tie going into the third. Christo and Dougie Hamilton getting a goal apiece. We're killing them in shots 29-15. And then Drew Doughty gets us a power play goal there, but then Boston ties it right back up with a goal by David Krejci. And then we have a power play late in the game, but Patrice Bergeron shorthanded gets the goal there, which was kind of a ball buster. And Boston upsets Columbus in game number 5, 3-2 with a shorthanded goal. And there goes Julius Honka down with an injury. We put Tim Erickson in his place. And then we move on to a game number 6 here against the Bruins in TD Garden. But Sprong starts us out with a 1-0 lead, and then a crazy second period with a 4-3 lead for us, with Savard, Janmark, and Christo scoring for us, and Riley Smith putting up 2 and Ryan Garbutt putting up another one. So a weird second period there at TD Garden, 30-13 on the shots, but not really doing too well for Bobrovsky in this game, but he does have a nice solid third period to close down the door as we win this game 5-3 in game number 6, and we win the series 4-2 over the Boston Bruins. So a crazy second period of back and forth goals being scored, but Columbus does get enough to beat them, and we move on to round number 2 to play. Actually, we're making some line changes here because a couple of our players were getting back. Julius Honka does make his way back into the lineup. We take out, I believe, Tim Erickson. We insert him back into the lineup, so we're just doing the line changes around here as Honka is getting put in. And I'll show you guys the point totals for that first series. And just doing some more roster moves here, Joe. I don't know what the hell I'm doing. Making some roster moves. Yeah, we're doing roster moves. I don't know what the hell. Should have edited this out, but that's all right. Whatever, it's all good. All right, so we're simulating up here. Still got a lot of time left for some players to get back, and our second round opponent was going to be the New Jersey Devils. So a pretty interesting team there in the second round that we're going to match up with. The Devils, another team we have never played before, and now we finally get to the player stats for that playoff run. So, as you guys can see here, Patrick Kane does get 5 points. Our first line actually did pretty well. Kane, Johansson, Sprong, McDavid all had 5 points. Fabry on the third line and short second line time had 4 points, so he had a nice little playoff run. Matthias Almark had 1 point in 3 games that he filled in. Toffoli obviously was being out with an injury. Our first line was a bit negative, but that's all right. Defensively, Ryan Murray had a good first series with 4 points. Same thing with Doughty. And then Bob actually had an all right series as well, with a 1.8 and went 4-1. Varlamov did play the first game, but 2.27. He did have a very good first game, but nothing you can do there. So here we go, our round 2 matchup against the New Jersey Devils, and here's what their lineup is looking like. Reed Boucher, Adam Henrique, and Tomo Ruutu, Matthias Tedenby, Travis Zajac, and Yuri Hudler, Lori Korpikoski, Jacob Josephson, and Thomas, and Lidstrom, Matt Stajan, and Carcillo. So we know Reed Boucher was the league leader in goals this year with 45. We know in their fourth line that Carcillo guy, he was a draft pick, I believe, the first overall pick 2 years ago. So we know he's pretty good. Other than that, nothing really too special about the New Jersey Devils. They're kind of just low 85s. They don't have that superstar stud, but they got a nice little depth team there on offense. And then if we look at their defense, they got John Merrill and Adam Larson, at Andy Green, Damon Severson, Alexander Urbom, and Pankowitz. So it's a pretty decent defense as well. Ours is definitely still much better, but 286s for their top 2 isn't bad. And then they got a nice little young defensive core as well. And then goaltender Corey Schneider and James Reimer as their backups. So we definitely have the advantage over the Devils in this series on paper. So we go into here. Game number 1 doesn't really start out too well. Yuri Hudler and I think Joey Carcillo get a goal there in the second, and then they take a 3-1 lead after the second period. Connor McDavid does get a goal for us, but we move into the third here. Not a really good game for Columbus. We put up a decent amount of shots, but Corey Schneider shut down the door. Devils walk away with a 4-1 win in game number 1 with a pretty good depth scoring from their second, third, and fourth line. So Devils get the early jump in the series, but then we come back in game number 2, storming a 3-1 lead after the first period with goals being scored there. And then once again, another 3-goal second period there with, I think, Sprong, Martin, and Doughty getting... I think Doughty and Sprong had 2 goals apiece so far in that game. And then we just continue to pour it on there, putting up 8 goals on the New Jersey Devils in game number 2 for an 8-2 win. In game number 2, a convincing win over the Devils, just lit them up for goal scoring. This series was a kind of back and forth, I guess a book of 2 tales, if you would add, for the Columbus Blue Jackets. Some games we were there, some games we weren't. So we move on to game number 3 now. Tomo Ruutu starts off with a 1-0 lead for the Devils after the first, and then the second period it's still 1-0, and then once again, just the Columbus Blue Jackets offense just doesn't have anything to show for it there. We had a bunch of power plays in that third period, but couldn't connect. Devils walk away game number 3 with a 1-0 win, so no really good goal scoring there. Ryan Murray gets hurt, so Erickson goes back into the lineup again. Then we move on to game number 4, and once again the offense shows up. Brandon Dubinsky and Robbie Fabry get 2 in the first period. The Devils get 1 back from Damon Severson in the second, but then we just pile it on in the third once again. Bryson Martin gets a goal there. And, well, we don't really pile it on that much, but we get that insurance marker from Bryson Martin in the third to win the game 3-1 to split the series up at 2 apiece, and now going into a 3-game series. between the Devils. So game number 5 back home in Columbus, and I think this is another game we completely killed them in. Another 3-goal first period for us to take a 3-1 lead after the first period, and then another 3-goal second period to take the lead 6-3. So once again, there were 2 games in this whole entire series where goals were just being scored like a madhouse. And so we got a 3-goal lead over the Devils. We put up 6 on them. They do get one back to make it 6-4, but I do believe we closed down the game for the rest of that game. Enough bullshit in that crazy game, but we win that one 6-4. So there's been 2 games in this entire series that have been 8-2 and 6-4. So crazy games here against the Devils, but now we move on to game 6, looking to close out the series. And once again, another good start, a 2-goal first period from our first liners, Ryan Johansson and Daniel Sprong. Devils get one back from a power play with Adam Henrique, and they're looking to capitalize. They had a power play in the third period, but Sergei Bobrovsky shuts down the door, empty netter for Brandon Dubinsky. We win that game 3-1, beat the Devils in 6 games as well. As we move on to the Eastern Conference Finals for the second year, for actually the third year in a row with this team. So we're looking pretty good. I didn't think the Devils team would have been a team to overly power us, but still, we did a good job there. And look at that, 3 guys with point per game so far in the playoffs, with Kane, Sprong, and Johansson with 12. McDavid and Fabry's having one hell of a playoff run again. He's having 11 points in 12 games. McDavid had 11. Christo had 8 points as well. So our depth was definitely putting some work in. Our fourth line guys weren't getting the points that they got, I believe, 2 years ago. So we didn't have to rely on the fourth line guys to get us points. Finally, our first and our second lines were actually stepping up for us. Murray got hurt, but then Doughty started to step his game up pretty well. He was getting a lot of goals. He had 4 goals in 12 games. So our defense was doing a good job. And then Bobrovsky, a little bit of a shaky series. He had let up a lot of goals, but he still did a pretty good job there. And now as we move on to the Eastern Conference Finals, we had a rematch against the Montreal Canadiens. So this series was going to be pretty interesting. We know last year they had Fucali in that. They didn't have Price due to an injury. But this year would be something different. So here's the lineup for the Canadiens. Pretty much the exact same as last year. Max Pacioretty, Alex Galchenyuk, and Thomas Vanek, Stefan Fournier, Michael Bournival, and Nicholas Jensen. They picked up Nicholas Jensen after they lost Hartnell to retirements. So they traded for him as a second liner, which is definitely an upgrade to Hartnell, I'll say that. Third line, Steve Downey, Louis LeBlanc, and Brendan Gallagher, and then Matt Martin, Thomas Plekanec, and Dietz. So it looks like they still had an injury or 2. I was definitely going to go check that out because they did have a 2-way defenseman playing their fourth line right wing spot. But once again, they also traded back for Brendan Gallagher. I believe early in this GM mode they traded him away, and then they traded back for him again. So they got him back on their third line, which was a pretty good upgrade, I would say so. And, their first line is still pretty good with Pacioretty, Galchenyuk, and Vanek, but we're coming pretty confident into the series, knowing that we handled the Montreal Canadiens last year pretty well, with or without Carey Price, but still the team in front of Montreal is still pretty good. But we definitely were going to go check out injuries to see who they were missing. And then if we take a look on defense here, Josh Georges and PK Subban, Nathan Beaulieu, Nick Schultz, Alexei Emlin, and Kevin Bieksa. So I believe they picked up Bieksa last year during the offseason. Their defense is still pretty good, but we have a much better... Well, actually, I think Montreal might have had the advantage in defense here because of the injuries that we were dealing with. And then there you go. There's the wild card in that Carey Price is not injured this year. 91 overall goaltender that we are going to have to face. I do check out the injuries, and they are dealing with a couple injuries to Lars Eller, Richard Panik, and Carl Klingberg. I don't think Eller was going to be back. He had a separated shoulder. I believe Panik and Klingberg were going to be making their way back into the series, but not until like games 2 or 3. So here we go, the Eastern Conference Finals up against the Montreal Canadiens in this series. We start off game number 1 with 2 power play goals from Fabry and Doughty to get us started, so a good first. They do tie it up in the second with a goal there from Thomas Vanek, but we do have a power play going into the third period here. And we do get a nice little goal there from Connor McDavid to make it 3-2, and then an empty netter again from Connor McDavid, who puts up 2 in the third period. As we win game number 1, 4-2 over the Montreal Canadiens. So a very good game there. We're coming off of the Devil series. We're scoring goals, so this team was doing absolutely everything right. Ekman Larson got injured, so then we had to bring somebody up from our minor league system, I believe, to fill in for OEL. So that was a big hurt, but now we have to rely on Drew Doughty to get it done. So we go into the game number 2 here, second period, Connor McDavid gets his third goal in 2 games of this series to make it a 1-0 lead. And Daniel Sprong got a power play goal. They would get one back from PK Subban, but then we would put another one right back up on the board as Ryan Johansson would make it 3-1. And Columbus takes a early 2-0 series lead over the Montreal Canadiens, and it's looking very reminiscent of last year's series once again. So we simulate up here. Toffoli actually came back from injury, so we inserted him back in the lineup for game number 3. First period, 0-0. Second period, and it's tied up at 1. Louis LeBlanc and Danny Cristo get 2 on the board. So it's a 1-1 tie going into the third, but Daniel Sprong makes it a 2-1 lead for the Blue Jackets. And Sergei Bobrovsky would shut down the door yet again. Tyler Toffoli comes back from his injury, gets an empty netter. And deja vu, yes, once again, the Columbus Blue Jackets, with or without Carey Price in their lineup for the Montreal Canadiens, they take a 3-0 series lead. Bryson Martin gets hurt, so we had to call another guy up from our minor league system, but we have a 3-0 series lead over the Montreal Canadiens going into game number 4, looking to sweep them out yet again. And it's a 0-0 tie after the first period. 16-2 were the shots. It was brutal first period for us. 23-17, we climbed back in shots, but then early on in the second period, Tyler Toffoli and Patrick Kane get 2 goals very early in the third period, and then we would add on an empty netter from Julius Honka, and then once again, the Columbus Blue Jackets yet again sweep out the Montreal Canadiens for the second year in a row in the Eastern Conference Finals. So once again, Columbus's offense just clicked really well. And then we take a look at the point totals here. Our first and our second lines were just doing absolutely amazing. Johansson was above a point-a-game player. McDavid and Kane both had 16. Robbie Fabry had 15 points in 16 games. The guy was being an absolute monster this playoffs. Cristo, I believe, had like 14, and Dubinsky had like 10. And Sprong had a good amount of points as well. So we're doing pretty good. Doughty has 8 points in 16 games. He was definitely our rock back there on defense. He was the only one I don't think got hurt this entire playoffs. And as you guys can see, we threw in guys like Nicholas Jansen and Dalton Thrower to play defense for us. Bobrovsky had a really good series, lowered his GAA down. And as we go back to the Stanley Cup Finals to play the Anaheim Ducks, who beat the LA Kings in the Western Conference Finals. So the Anaheim Ducks are going to be an interesting team to go up here against. Their lineup: Kyle Palmieri, Ryan Getzlaf, Corey Perry, Jacob Silverberg, Matthew Barzal, and TJ Oshie. Devontae Smith-Pelly, Nick Bonino, and Emerson Edom, and then Erik Karlsson, not the defenseman Erik Karlsson, Nosen, and Rickard Rakell. So their lineup was actually really interesting. I really it was very interesting the way the Anaheim Ducks lineup was set up. Usually, it was really weird to see Kyle Palmieri get up to an 86 overall. You don't really see him get up to be like an 86 to become like a first or a second liner type player. You always usually see him as like at least a third or a fourth line player, but never really saw him get that high up. They still had Getzlaf and Perry, which were 291s, which are going to be difficult to go up against. Their first line definitely was better, even with ours with Kane, Johansson, and Toffoli. I would still say their first line was a little bit better. They had the Rookie of the Year who won the Calder, Matthew Barzal, I believe, last year playing center. They had TJ Oshie, who they picked up from a trade, and then they also had a sniper on every line. And I don't know why they had Rickard Rakell, who was an 84 sniper, down there on their fourth line, but I guess to throw some sort of offense to their fourth line. But yeah, Anaheim was looking like a team that could score goals. Looked like a team that was definitely going to have some firepower and looked like they could score some goals everywhere you look at it. So the Anaheim Ducks were definitely looking like a scary team on offense, no doubt. Excuse me. And then if we look at their defense, they got Cam Fowler and Sean Day, Lucas Biza, Sammy Vatanen, and Justin Schultz and Cameron Gaunce. So they're weak in their last top 6 position, but their top 2 is actually pretty good. Cam Fowler progressed really well. Sean Day, I know he's a draft pick pretty early on. And then Vatanen and Spiza are actually pretty decent top 4s. But I still think even with the injury to OEL, I would say they'd had the advantage on defense because we were missing OEL. Unless he might have came back in this series. I'm not entirely sure what happened. I think he might have came back, but that's what their defense was looking like. And then in goaltending, they had John Gibson and Pillman, 87 and 85. So it was going to be an interesting matchup here against the Anaheim Ducks in the Stanley Cup Final. So game 1 started off, Kyle Palmieri gets gets the first goal in the first period, but then Daniel Sprong ties it up in the second. So it's a pretty even game, even shots throughout the first couple periods. But then Daniel Sprong gets his second of the game and late in the third, not really late in the third period, halfway through the third. And Daniel Sprong was the only person to get 2 goals that game, gets his 9th and his 10th of the playoffs so far, and Columbus walks away game number 1 with a 2-1 win, which was pretty nice. So we move into game number 2 here, back in Columbus yet again. Started off 1-1 tie. Getzlav gets a shorthander, but then Daniel Sprong gets another one. He's like McDavid the last series. 3 goals so far in two games for Daniel Sprong, and then as we simulate the second period here, are the depth guys kind of getting some goals for both teams. Boone Jenner and Devontae Smith-Pelly get tied this game back up at 2. As we're continuing to simulate here, goes into overtime in game number 2. We are going to need more than 1 overtime. It goes to a second overtime, but then Daniel Sprong yet again does it again. His second multi-goal game of the Stanley Cup Finals, and his 4 goals in 2 games for Daniel Sprong. It's his 11th and his 12th of the playoffs. Christo gets 2 assists that game, and we take a 2-0 series lead over the Anaheim Ducks, and we're looking pretty good here starting game number 3. The fourth line coming in clutch. Boone Jenner and Adam Tambellini get 2 goals there in the first period. Tied up for 8 on shots, so we're looking pretty good. You know, it's always going to be looking pretty good when the fourth line guys score. But Anaheim does kind of climb back into the second period. 2 power play goals from TJ Oshie and Matthew Barzal. Daniel Sprong does get another one there to make him have 5 goals in 3 games so far in the Stanley Cup Finals. Cam Fowler does get one on Varlamov. Nick Bonino gets one on Varlamov, and I kind of was starting to shit my pants a little bit because I was like, oh my god, don't freaking tell me. I do not want to see freaking Sergei Bobrovsky get hurt in that freaking game. That's the one thing I definitely did not want to see happen in that series. So he did not get injured. He probably just got pulled or something like that, or pulled for precautionary reasons. So Anaheim does take game number 3 from us, and we move on to game number 4 here. Patrick Kane does get a late power play goal, and Daniel Sprong gets another power play goal. Empty netter for Robbie Fabry. So Bobrovsky comes back after getting pulled, I believe, in game number 3. Comes back with a game 4 shutout, 3-0 win for us. Daniel Sprong once again another power play goal. They have 6 goals in 4 games for him in the Stanley Cup Finals, which was absolutely amazing. And then we move on to game number 5. Stanley Cup was in the building for the Columbus Blue Jackets here. First period, 0-0. Second period, 0-0. Fairly even on shots, so it's all going to come down to the third period. And then with about 5 minutes left to go, Patrick Kane gets a power play goal and then gets an empty netter with about a minute left to go. And there you go. 2-goal third period from Patrick Kane as the Columbus Blue Jackets beat the Anaheim Ducks 2-0. Back-to-back shutouts for Sergei Bobrovsky. And the Columbus Blue Jackets are your Year 7 Stanley Cup winners, winning into 5 games over the Anaheim Ducks. And what a series it was for our offense, no doubt. Daniel Sprong had one hell of a series with 23 points, 14 goals in 21 games. This guy was an absolute monster in the playoffs. If it wasn't for Sergei Bobrovsky having a pretty good Stanley Cup Finals performance, I would have given that guy the Conn Smythe, no doubt. Robbie Fabry had one hell of a year as well. All of our first line and second line guys pretty much had point per game players, but Robbie Fabry had an amazing playoff run. 16 points in 21 games for him for being only like 82 overall. It was pretty good for him. Our depth not really showed up. Tyler Toffoli, he got injured, I believe, again for the second year in a row. Only 4 points in 10 games, but the depth of this Columbus Blue Jackets team really put in work. It wasn't really the fourth line guys getting goals this year. It was more over the fourth line guys just killing penalties, doing the right things that they needed to do, and playing solid defense. And Sergei Bobrovsky went 16-4 with a 1.56 goals against average. I really would have given Daniel Sprong the Conn Smythe, putting up 23 points, 23 games, getting 14 goals. But you know what? It's whatever. And then we take a look at the awards here at the end of the year. Stanley Cup goes to your Columbus Blue Jackets for the second time in 4 years, and the second time out of the 7-year GMO for Columbus. So it was pretty good that we managed to win that cup this year. So President's Trophy went to us. So we capped off a President's Trophy year with the Stanley Cup. Clarence Escamilla went to Anaheim. Prince of Wales went to us. Art Ross went to Alexander Barkov. Hart Memorial went to Alexander Barkov. Norris went to Josh Georges. Leibing went to Barkov. Calder Memorial went to Shannon Fedoruk. Conn Smythe went to Sergei Bobrovsky once again. Don't know if I agreed with that decision or not. I would have given it to Sprong, but you know what? Still, Sergei Bobrovsky is definitely deserving of the Conn Smythe, especially for his performance in the Stanley Cup Finals, putting up back-to-back shutouts and pretty much holding the Anaheim Ducks at bay. So Sergei Bobrovsky does win the Conn Smythe here. The Vezina went to Jonathan Quick this year. So William N. Jennings went to Pekka Rinne, Bill Masterton, Derek Forbert. And I believe that's it. Frank J. Selke, Sidney Crosby, Ted Lindsay, Jonathan Quick, and Maurice Richard went to Reed Boucher. So those were all the awards that happened. And there you go, guys. The Year 7 Stanley Cup champions are your Columbus Blue Jackets. And there's the entire playoff run into one video. And there'll be one more GM mode episode for this Columbus Blue Jackets series, as we'll do our final entire whole wrap-up of this series. And that'll be coming up next, guys. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.